The doctrine of eyes. Returning to the fundamental teaching of this work and taking as example the doctrine of eyes, how many eyes do we then have in us? P.D. Ouspensky was once asked, "Have we 20 or 30? He replied, "We have hundreds of thousands of eyes in us, due only to the action of buffers. We do not see them as distinct, but retain our belief that we have only one eye, which we call me, which always acts and feels in the same way. This is imaginary eye. And it is that imagination that we have one eye, the imaginary eye, which prevents us from changing." On another occasion he was asked whether eyes weren't imaginary, and answered in so many words that eyes were real beings within each of us, real persons. But because we do not see them, we have the imagination of having real eye. The eyes are real, he said, but the imaginary eye is imaginary, and each eye is a small living being within oneself. Just as people are divided into number 1, number 2, and number 3 man, so these eyes in people are similarly divided. Each eye has a thinking part, an emotional part, and a moving part, but its center of gravity may lie more in the sphere of thought, or in our emotions, and even in actions. Recall previous commentaries where it was noted that the median, or central level, is what determines our center of gravity in that moment, but this changes constantly, as corks bobbing about the waves of an ocean. Each eye is a distinct persona that takes charge of us, then speaks as orator or spokesperson in the moment, calling itself I in our name. Some of the eyes are very harmful to us, some are indifferent, and others are actually quite useful. The question is then asked, whether all of our thoughts come from different eyes. The answer to which is mostly yes, but not only that, as all of our moods, all feelings, actions, and words come from different eyes in ourselves. Such as we are, we have no individuality, no real eye, no big, unified eye that controls all the other eyes and arranges them in the correct order. So at first it is easier to observe eyes acting on our thoughts, taking us down certain trains of thought and concept. We observe, for example, that we are thinking in a certain way about someone else. This is an I that is thinking, which we are then taking as ourselves. Perhaps we are thinking about our life, which is again an I, and we are in turn taking that as ourselves. We do not see the trick that is constantly being played on us, and take all these thoughts as originating from one source. We think, I am thinking this, or we say, this is what I think. We do not see that something is thinking for us, and that we are not actually thinking at all. We hear the thoughts of these eyes as if it were us who was thinking them. In fact, we think that we think. Better eyes can see worse eyes, but worse eyes cannot see better eyes. What is higher can see what is lower, but what is lower cannot see what is higher. When you begin real observation of your thoughts, you start to see certain kinds of thoughts that you do not wish to accept, say about other people or about yourself. If you think that these thoughts are you, or if you say, I think this, then you make one of the greatest mistakes we can make in this work. We give those thoughts power over us, because we identify with them, simply going along with the flow, without realizing what the work is continually teaching, that we must practice inner separation. If we take everything that happens in the mind space of our thoughts as I, then we cannot practice inner separation. Why is this so? Because we take everything going on in our thoughts as ourselves, so how could we then separate if we take everything as ourselves, everything as I? How can I possibly separate from I? With regard to the sphere of emotions, here again, many I's exist in us that bring about changes in our emotional state. Just as eyes transmit thoughts into our minds, so do eyes transmit feelings into the space of our emotions. These eyes affect our emotional state directly, and scarcely touch any thinking center, meaning that we simply react. Some of these eyes can exhaust us, make us lose confidence, make us feel depressed, low-spirited, lethargic, and so on. Yet they are eyes acting upon us, and in so doing, nourishing themselves at our expense, from available life force. If we could always remember ourselves, then those eyes could not have power over us. However, as a rule, we relinquish to them so much power that we scarcely challenge them, and so they walk in and out of our emotional center, as if we belong to them. Although they are difficult to observe directly, after a time in work, one can be able to detect their presence by being aware of a drop in level or a sudden loss of force. That loss of gumption leaking away, like the air leaking from a tire. If you are not quick enough in checking them, then eyes of that kind will push their way in and take possession of you, and you'll find it may take days to get rid of them. We have to learn to tread within ourselves very carefully. It is no use arguing with unpleasant eyes. It's like throwing cupcakes at a bulldozer, which is why the practice of inner separation is emphasized in work on self. One moment of being asleep in some difficult situation will let in eyes of this nature, and they are literally the devil to get rid of. The next moment you are in their power, and they will make you see everything and feel everything in their own peculiar way. If someone in the work at such a moment gives you the right kind of shock, you suddenly see and feel everything quite differently, wondering what on earth you were up to before. This means that the eyes have changed, that different eyes are now in charge of you, and there's been a shift change. All our work lies in separating from wrong eyes, which begins with thoughts, and then leads on to emotions. This means that a struggle begins in oneself between different eyes, between being in wrong or in the right eyes. The power of this work can give the power to separate from those wrong eyes. Life cannot give us the power because life quite simply encourages many wrong eyes, which is why we are taught to observe ourselves in the light of work. The work is a system of observation, and comes from conscious humanity, from those who have gone through this battle of eyes before us and attained their goal. When we are in bad states of thinking and feeling, if we make no effort to recall better states, then we are dragged down into the abyss. Yet we need not be cast down like that, because what drags us down lies within the power of our own conscious choice. We have the power to choose internally, of thinking in one way, or of thinking in some other way. Sometimes when we can do nothing with ourselves for the time being, we can at least retain the power of not completely consenting to our current state, of not believing in it entirely. And as it were, being patient with ourselves, realizing we are wrongly oriented and yet unable to see how to get out of that state. Then you can be sure that you will get into a better state after a pause. Change your activity, go for a walk, do something involving movement center like washing the dishes or preparing a salad, and you'll find that activity helps shut down the negativity. If we, on the other hand, fully consent to our thoughts and feelings, if we say I to them in a total sense, then we will lay down in ourselves something which next time will be far more difficult to separate from. Because we have signed our name in full on the dotted line of that check. When you realize beyond doubt that you have different eyes in you, when you can hear them speaking or notice them working on your emotions, and yet all the while remain separated from them, you begin to understand this work on its practical side. You begin to understand the first line of work, which is work on self. So what is an I? An I is a definite personality in us, a small being, with an intellectual, an emotional, and a moving part. Understand that I's are quite real individuals within us. On one occasion, Ouspensky said, "You all think that I's are not real, and assume that they are theoretical. I assure you they are very real, and live in the house of your own being, continually controlling you, like a home filled with many, many children, all running about in chaos." He spoke here of the parable of a house in disorder, in which there is no master, and where every I uses the house phone in the name of the master. Is it not desirable to identify with I's that seek to work? Do these I's then gradually merge to become deputy steward, proceed to form steward, and then finally become real I? We are cautioned against identifying with anything, but it is desirable to go along with work I's, listening to what they have to say, particularly when we find ourselves in the power of negative I's. By means of self-observation, through this work and what it teaches, a number of I's can gradually become separated from the herd, and those form deputy steward. This development of consciousness through self-observation leads eventually to the higher stages of steward, and finally master. If someone does not nurture work I's, they become feeble, and may even leave us permanently. Can our I's then be divided into groups of similar I's, form micro-communities with which most of us are familiar? Can they be dealt with as groups, or must each separate eye be sorted out and worked upon individually? Eyes are divided into different groups because they inhabit different subdivisions of centers. Eyes that occupy very small subdivisions of centers are very small eyes. They may be useful for life experiences, but cannot understand the work. For this reason, work teaches that we must value working, and feel it as something distinct from everyday life, greater than ordinary life, because through this emotional valuation, we are immediately placed in the presence of bigger eyes. It is impossible for a long time to see eyes individually, however it is possible to see that one has a number of different personalities. Those personalities are composed of many eyes, usually about 20 or 30, but each constitutes a definite group, as for example, a number of eyes that belong to our professional personality. Ouspensky once said, "Try to see quite definite personalities within you. We have a social personality, a professional personality, a domestic personality, a family personality and so on, but each of these is made up of a number of small eyes, forming a mini tribe." Since eyes are represented in each center, can fidgeting be said to be done by an eye, and if so, does that also imply that habit is accompanied by intellectual and emotional fidgeting? Certainly, fidgeting is done by an eye that is chiefly in the small subdivisions of moving center. Then yes, it can be accompanied by intellectual and emotional fidgeting. It may be a rather powerful eye acting on all three centers equally. This obviously requires observation, and observation begins with noticing the different work of our three centers. If we notice that we are intellectually in a fidgeting, uncertain state, we may also notice that we make certain movements, play with a lock of hair or scratch somewhere. Often mere fidgeting is a small automatic eye in the moving center, for instance. A person may constantly be running their fingers through their hair or tossing their head, and this sort of fidgeting can belong to a very small, practically automatic eye in the moving center, but not interfering with the work of emotional or intellectual center. We all have these kinds of mechanical tricks, even when we are deeply concentrating. Are all eyes then acquired? They are indeed acquired, and acquired in all manner of ways. It is said that they are chiefly acquired through imitation and education. However, they are all acquired because they belong to whichever personality is also acquired, like accessories to a cosplay outfit. The work explains that it may be true that there is a trace of real I in us, but that is all that it has to say on the matter. Real I is not acquired. It is already there in potentiality, from the moment of our birth. We do not make real I, we seek to approach it, because only then can we know who we really are. Are there eyes in essence? No, it cannot be said that there are eyes within essence, although some eyes that we acquire may be very close to essence. For example, we can have more essential eyes. On the other hand, we have eyes that are very far from essence, that belong chiefly to false personality. If our personality were the expression of our essence, and dovetailed within it, then we might claim that our eyes were all connected with essence. However, this is not the case such as we are at present. Through the pressure of education, family, culture and environment, personality may be very unlike our essence. When this is the case, it is not unnatural to expect that we could experience an unusual degree of inner disharmony. That feeling of not belonging, or being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Suppose that someone has in their personality useful eyes, such as hospitable eyes, helpful eyes, and eyes that are well practiced in life skills, but they act only to be seen of men, so to speak. Suppose after work on themselves they were able to do the same things from themselves, then would those eyes become essential within them? Most of us possess all sorts of useful eyes acquired through upbringing and education. Remember that personality must be formed, and may be formed for better or worse. Good training is necessary for everyone, accompanied by good common or garden discipline. We all have to learn a trade or profession in order to become householders, or laymen and laywomen. We have to learn manners and so on, but all of this is acquired from day-to-day life. The action of work is such that it chooses those eyes that are useful, then lifts them up so that they no longer act mechanically, but can be used deliberately, in other words, consciously. The work makes a kind of ark for us, into which everything useful goes. we cannot do this ourselves, and the action of work does it, then arranges everything in the right order. A place for everything and everything its place. Is essence then the seed from which real I can grow? In a sense, yes. But it is better to say that behind essence lies real I, then through the development of essence we come into contact with real I. The object of work is for us to become more real, and to get rid of false, unreal I's. This can only be done through inner sincerity, long observation, and through the influence of work acting upon us over an extended period of time. The latter depends upon struggle, friction, and the heating of the alchemist's retort. It's that which keeps the work alive within us, keeps the home fire burning over an extended period. All this leads to the development of essence, to finding the gold within each of us, which puts us into contact with steward, and then eventually real I. Conceive steward and real I as being above, on a higher level, awaiting us, being as it were more internal, deeper and beneath the surface upon which most of our psychic life is acted out. Whether you call it a movement upward or a movement inward, it amounts to the same thing in the end. All of this work has to be done by ourselves, and there is no advocacy, no savior. We are in the position of having lost our way, and need to find the path back again. Everyone is created perfect, with real I, but we descend into this world, and are materially incarnate, which means both literally and psychologically losing our way. The allegory of the fall. There is some reason for this, and one of the explanations is that we are created as self-developing organisms, and so must ascend Jacob's ladder in order to find our way back home again. It is an experiment, a quest, and each one of us undergoes a trial based upon this idea, which must be constantly reflected upon, constantly held in mind. Is real I the individual limit of potential development that lies above every human being, the shape they could become, which is different for everyone, or is it all the same? It is the ultimate reality that we can attain, the best we can become, and being all that we can be. Because behind real I lies creation. Everyone is an individual creation, and so real I can never be the same for everyone. The trouble is that we try to imitate other people, so it ends up being a daffodil trying to become a tulip. There is not one single snowflake that is not dissimilar from another snowflake in its form of crystallization, although the general hexagonal pattern of a snow crystal is of course the same. Is there any difference between eyes and inner consciousness? There is no connection between these two factors. Eyes are eyes, and inner consciousness is inner consciousness. If we mean by inner consciousness the power of self-observation, then through this we can see eyes in ourselves. However, the question is like saying that if you have an electric torch in the dark, and see a wall in front of you, is that wall the same as the flashlight? The work says that through true self-observation, we let a ray of light into ourselves. Through this ray of light we may see a thing or two in us, but an eye is not the same as a ray of light, and of course a ray of light does not mean physical light, but the light of conscious awareness, which is the object of work on self. To expand and grow beyond anything we can imagine in our present state of being, so that we are eventually able to see ourselves at a glance, and everything going on in each center. If we really see a thing, even if we're unable to do anything with it, then it will recede. In seeing this we catch a glimpse of what all work is about. Catch a glimpse of what self-observation is, and why it's taught so strictly. The work teaches that self-observation is a method of change of being, which is an important thing to understand, and it can take years before we catch a glimpse of its meaning. On all this depends inner separation. How do we separate from anything in ourselves, unless we first observe it? If we cannot see ourselves at all, never observe what is acting through us at different times. If we take ourselves incorrectly as a monism, as having unity already, then we cannot change. If we could but see that we do not do what has not been done, and never observe where we have been, then we are certainly only externally minded, subjective, and have not awakened the power of observing I, or an inner sense that we are all given. We are given that inner sense so that we can fulfill our potential as self-developing organisms. All inner development would be quite impossible if we did not possess a sense that is turned inward, toward our psychic life. merely possessing 5 senses turned outward to the material world. Eyes within us are living, but may be induced by us to wither and so die. They are quite real entities, and whether they die or not is another question. This work merely teaches that if they are not nourished with life force, then they weaken, but if, like the shades of Hades, they drink of your blood daily, then they become alive and in turn speak in your name. Eyes may be absent from you for a time, and then revisit, when the light of day is cast once more upon them. This applies particularly to higher work eyes in oneself. Our ordinary eyes are constantly with us, and are referred to in esotericism as the poor. It would be really interesting if we were able to discover what truly lies within us. We could live a rich life, with varying eyes, some quite valuable. Yet this would mean having reached a level of balance and harmony, where we are able to move freely about in ourselves, where all different sides of us are to some extent developed, where we no longer find our center of gravity in only one place, as with man, number 1, number 2 and number 3. If I am, for example, very identified with my professional life, then I shall not be able to move freely in myself, and have only a very one-sided development. When we are identified with our possessions or our birth side, our familial relationships, our pets or whatever it might be, then we cannot become balanced individuals. One of the best phrases we can use with regard to understanding what balanced man means is to be able to see what it means not to be identified with your life. Our past life should not catch hold of us always and then hold us down. Here we all have something practical to work on for quite some time. Some impressions fall directly onto our emotional center, which means it is necessary to observe how the emotional center reacts in the face of life, without any self-observation. Employ the intellectual center to observe yourself, and don't let an impression fall directly onto emotional center, without that moment of consciousness, in which one sees where it is falling. Observing I starts in the intellectual center, where our consciousness broadly speaking lies. It is more a question, though, of what we let through. We can take hold of a red-hot poker accidentally, and yet observe the reaction before it happens automatically. It is a question of instinctive center, and the slight potential for control. The same applies to our emotional center. If we have not as yet seen how we react from our attitudes, which is mental to begin with, then accompanied by practically no thought, it's then that the impression falls directly onto the negative part of emotional center. The work teaches that our impressions come in through intellectual center, and then pass to other centers. It is necessary to make a conscious point at the place where they come in to form this good practice. If we allow an impression to pass right through, then it will follow its own habitual path. We should begin to check the effect of external impressions in our mental center first. For example, need I, if I feel cold, shiver and complain about it? If I am more in control of myself, I need not react in that way unless I wish to. If I am not quite mechanical, then the point of incoming impressions that fall upon my mind will be capable of a kind of selection, so that they do not trigger the same reactions automatically. The point of the work is to make a conscious space at the place of incoming impressions, which demands the power of observation, so that one is separated from the continual effect of life coming in and reacting always in the same mechanical way. It is wonderful to realize that one need not take a life event always in the exact same manner. However, for this to begin to take place, we first have to see an event, and at the same time see our mechanical reaction to it. When the work intervenes between these two things, the external event coming in through our senses, and the mechanical reaction that would ordinarily take place, when there is this moment of conscious choice, which the work seeks to establish in us, then we begin to understand what the work is about, practically. This is called moving hydrogen-12 to the point of incoming impressions, which means also beginning to live more consciously in the midst of life, and is the place of the first conscious shock.